Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for this special screening of Initiation. Um, this film is offered courtesy of Saban Films, and it's going to be available in theaters, on demand, and digitally. Oh, actually, it already is. It debuted on Friday, May 7th. So if you're interested in getting the word out about the film, you can send people to initiationfilm.com. We're going to run the whole film now during the webinar. It runs about 97 minutes. And then we're going to be joined by a bunch of the cast and crew for a Q&A after the film. That's going to include the director, John Berardo, who's an SCA alum, along with his co-writers, Brian Frager, also an SCA alum, and Lindsay LaVanchy, who's also the lead actress in the film. And then we have SCA alum Jonathan Pope and SCA alumna Kristina Lyons, the editor, who are going to join us as well. So that's a great panel, and I hope that you guys will stick around for that and enjoy the film in the meantime. Thanks. I just need to make sure to record. So sorry about that. And I need to do one other quick thing here to make sure that everyone in the audience sees my gallery.
Everybody say cheese, cheese,
Cheese.
SCA reunion.
So I'm really interested to talk about this film's origins with the Media Institute for Social Change.
Yeah.
That's obviously something that we have here at the School of Cinematic Arts, and it's a really interesting program. This, I think, really shows the possibilities that can come out of something like that, given the fact that you guys made a horror film. So let's talk a little bit about what that process was and what you tried to do with the Institute to bring this story to life in a way that also reflected some important themes.
Yeah, so I was at USC from 2010 to 2011, and Brian, Kristina, and John Pope and I were all the same class. And in 2012, Michael Taylor, I was in 546. Our movie was Birthmark. And Michael Taylor came in and he pitched the class to us. And so I decided, hey, I'm going to take it. And I really wanted to continue this idea of online privacy, because I am a huge horror fan and I hadn't seen a horror movie that had really dealt with social media in a way. And Brian and I we did a movie together called Ouija, as like a directing scene. It was like my first horror movie in grad school. You come to grad school with like an idea of what you want to make, and then, you kind of grow. And the Media Institute for Social Change was such a great opportunity because the class teaches you how to incorporate a social issue into a narrative without sounding too much like a PSA, or at least that's the goal of the class. And so I, being a huge horror fan, really wanted to recreate the opening scene of Scream and really warn people on, with the online dangers of social media and what you put about yourself out there. And the entire Michael Taylor and Jeremy Kagan taught the class. The entire class, they kept saying to me, I see how you're making a scary movie, but I don't see the social issue. Well, one of the benefits of that class is that after you take it, they work with Annenberg to do a test audience. And the test audience will say, like, you can ask whatever questions you want. Like 90% of people went online and changed their Facebook profile settings after watching our film.
Wow.
And so we knew that we had a really solid idea, and we knew that we had a route to sort of take these social issues and incorporate them in a story. And what's even more beautiful is, like, Lindsay was in the short, and Kristina edited the short, and John DP'd the short. And like, this was like kind of like, Kristina and I, we were in 508 together, and she edited the 546 that I was doing, and Pope was doing another 546, the same class. So like, we had all been working together, and this was just such a really cool project, to do without, like, the whole 546, 508 stigma. It was our own independent kind of project with this new class. And it, and over time, once I graduated, I tried to write it into a script, and then Brian and I, we lived together, and we, made movies together, even if we weren't in the same classes. And we decided to write the script together, and it just evolved over the years.
Is the feature sort of a direct adaptation of the short, or what sorts of things did you have to modify or change to make it work as a feature?
So the short was essentially an homage to the movie Scream. That's just the best way to sell it. It's about a guy, but with a guy in Facebook. And so it's a 10-minute short, and we learned, well, we knew that we wanted the script to be set in college, not high school. So when Brian joined, it was automatically, turned into college. But we learned over time, like, Unfriended came out, and it, like, those ideas kind of started coming into media, but there were still so many social issues that we had thought about that we wanted to incorporate in the script that just evolved organically over time. Really, it's more so the spirit of the short and our style as filmmakers that is what you see translated into the feature, rather, and the cast, rather than, and the homage to horror, rather than an actual adaptation.
It's really kind of cool and unusual to see the star of the movie also pop up as one of the writers. So Lindsay, tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the writing process, what kind of agency that gave you over the way that your character was represented, or things that you wanted to include.
Yeah, well, I had been, after we did the short together, I was invited to do table reads as they were developing the feature. And, because it was so important for them to get feedback from individuals, people who are reading the script out loud and people who would come to just listen. I call, and Brian used to live there too, but I call John's apartment the factory. Kind of reminds me of like a gathering of artists. So we would be doing that for a while, and he would ask for feedback and I would give him feedback. And I enjoy the collaboration, and they really do too. And so they eventually just invited me to be a writer with them. And I think in terms of agency, I don't know about, I think it was just more so that we had really great conversations about the material and about what we could talk about and about what this film could be. And so I think that's more so what got us all excited. I think that's the most exciting thing, to find people that really just want to talk about something with you, and we can do it in an artistic way. So that was awesome. And it was, I do a lot of writing as an actor in preparation. So it was really wonderful to get to use those tools in developing characters alongside the director and the other producer. Like, that's just so rad. And then get to do that and give that to other actors. Yeah, it was what, that's how I came involved with it. But it was wonderful.
I'm curious to know, for anyone, I mean, I guess four out of the five of you have made films at USC before, so you know the process of shooting on a college campus pretty in depth. I'm curious, what then inspired you to go ahead and actually shoot a feature film on a college campus? Because I'm sure that from a producing standpoint, it's not the easiest task.
Not only was it not the
Brian?
easiest task, it was probably one of the biggest stress points of the production because of the content of the script.
Mm-hmm.
No college really wants to be associated with that. And so we went to a bunch of different schools. We canvassed, I mean, we were shooting locally in LA, so we probably canvassed every single college campus, community college campus, anything that could serve as a college campus. And we were locked into a location, and then 3 days before we were supposed to shoot there, they ended up giving us just an astronomical figure, and we had to scramble. And luckily we had an incredible producing team. So it was after production had started, and we had to basically, while the whole cast and crew were inside shooting on day 2 or 3, pivot and figure out where we were going to shoot 3 days later. And I was incredibly proud because John, Lindsay, and I are all UCLA alum. Sorry, guys. But we went to UCLA undergrad. And so it was UCLA that came through in the end. And it was just such an incredible experience to go back to campus. USC denied us, unfortunately. We tried there too. But it was an incredible experience to go back to campus and shoot everywhere that, are these iconic places that you see in so many movies throughout history. And so, it was really meaningful because when you're a student at UCLA over the summers, you see, all these big films shooting when classes are not in session. And, to have the opportunity to go back there was definitely a moment in our lives.
I do want to add that we did film near USC at a couple of houses because we do have the spirit of USC within the movie. The sorority was at one of the houses at USC. So we definitely gave you guys some love too.
No, it definitely had that feel. Like it was sort of like almost uncanny sometimes. I'm like, wait a minute, did they shoot at USC for some of this? And I couldn't quite put my finger on it. But let's talk actually about the Greek life, because that's the other thing is, you've got to find the right places to shoot that material. And I'm sure that there's probably some tension in terms of the way that Greek life is represented, particularly in a horror film of this particular subject matter. So how did you negotiate the use of a house? Was it an active, were you shooting an active Greek life housing?
No, we found an incredible location in Glendale. It's the historic Harris House, and it's a private owner. It's an old Victorian, and it's very Gothic in style. So, the minute John saw it, he can speak to it, but both Johns just fell in love with it, and we were glad we were able to make it happen for him.
Well, John,
yeah. I'll just add, like, it was a great house. We were also lucky too, because our production designer had filmed there before. So it's always very nerve-wracking when you're going into somebody's place and this guy had like $1,000 antiques everywhere. And so there was a day where like the production design crew had to move all that into a room. And luckily our designer already had that relationship established with him. So it made everything so much smoother, than it could have gone.
Jonathan, do you want to talk about some of the inspiration for the cinematography that you got out of these very specific locations?
Sure. Yeah. I think broadly speaking, John and I, when we worked together on the original short, had kind of established this visual language of just letting the character experience the event in the space without so much cutting. So we really we found that allowing the audience to just live with the character in a shot without punching in too much kind of up the tension in some really interesting ways. So we carried that love for long takes over into this feature, and fortunately that also benefited us because our schedule is so tight. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a minute, but as far as the locations go, John was always great about when we saw a location, he would kind of map out the script to the location, and we did heavy shot listing and storyboards, and that was because we wanted to be prepped, of course, but also because again the schedule was so tight, we just didn't have room for error or to mess anything up. We just didn't have any additional wiggle room, so we really had to be on our game and know exactly what we wanted everywhere.
How did that kind of approach to the cinematography then work in terms of your options in the edit room, Kristina?
Well, I'm always happy to let shots just keep going. Not only, I think especially when you're trying to build suspense or when you're trying to let a character deal with kind of a heavy moment, which there's obviously a number of those. So I kind of just want to like let them work and just let it play out and sort of have to suffer along with them. So it was every time I could leave a shot long, or every time, they had the more choreographed, really long takes. I loved it. And, like Pope said, it's also helpful when you're like, okay, I have to cut this scene today. It's great if I can leave half of it is one shot.
Yeah, I will add, we had such not only a condensed production schedule, we had an extremely condensed, even more so, editing schedule. And so Kristina started cutting, or at least going through dailies immediately on day 2. And that was, really obviously, she signed on for the condensed schedule, and it was really actually kind of cool because she would call me as she went through them and be like, hey, look at this person's performance. Think what you, and that was so cool. Like I never got that in film school. And so, moving forward, as we would continue shooting, I would always have what her suggestion would be in the back of my head. And that was very valuable. But this girl cut this movie in like a month.
Wow.
It was a little bit longer than that. I think technically our schedule was 10 weeks, but
It seemed like a month.
It is like an hour and a half. So don't worry, I kept busy.
She did.
So you were you made the film entirely, including post-production, before the pandemic started.
Yeah, we got our first investor at the December of 2018. Ended up going into production May, exactly almost 2 years ago, May of 2019. That was a 16-day shoot. 16 days, right? Yeah, 16 days. And then we picture locked by like July 30th. And then Brian and I went to Australia and had at least, I'd say 75% of the visual effects done within like a month. And like, a pretty solid pass of the sound design, because we really wanted to get the movie ready for festivals for 2020. Our goal was always South by Southwest. And we wanted to make sure the movie was in a polished enough place to do that. And so we did get into South by Southwest, and unfortunately, as you know, the world crashed. But luckily, we're still, a year later, still risen from the ashes and able to get the movie out there.
Tell us a little bit about the special effects. Sort of what is it that you guys were doing in post-production versus things that you decided to do on set?
We had a cool approach on set. I mean, Lindsay, do you want to tell them about what the actors did on set first, and then I can transition to the VFX?
Why, sure, Brian. It was awesome. Let me tell you, they thought so far into the future. So in general, everyone who's under the age of 60 is holding their phone at all times. Now that's just the world that we live in. So John was definitely like, we want all of the actors to have phones in their hands at all times for every single scene. But what we did while we were filming was we had a man named Serhan, young man named Serhan. He was our, Brian, do we call him social media coordinator? Our coordinator on set, social media? Yeah, right?
Virtual
He
production
got,
supervisor.
yeah. God bless him, because he was in charge of all of our phones and screen recording every single action that we did on our phones. And all of our characters had social media profiles, and we would communicate during takes on our phones to the other character. And all of it was recorded. And I'm sure that helped Kristina in the editing process, or maybe it made it even crazier. I don't know. But it was really cool. It grounded the actors in the moment, but it was definitely something that in post they were able to use and draw from, and we could expand the story. Brian.
Yeah, from a writing perspective, when we were all working on the script, we always felt like this film had to be social media savvy, because it felt like of the current generation. And we hadn't seen it done a lot well in films. There's, touchstone examples that we would draw from, but we also wanted to make our own language. And so, Pope did an incredible job framing for it on set. And we probably inundated Kristina with way too much footage and screen recordings for the 10 weeks of editing. But in the end, it was a really useful reference, because John and myself and like everyone on the post team were able to keep tweaking the story right up through the very end through the visual effects, and it allowed us to like tighten the mystery of it and add more red herrings and layer on and really like give the audience misdirects for those who are looking for them. And so it was a really cool process that it was a ton of work. Like John said, we were in Australia for 2 months, and then that got the bulk of the shots done. And then it came down to like John and I finishing like 30 extra shots, and John Pope coming on board for the titles, because he's a super talented motion graphics designer. So it was really a team effort. But we're really proud with where we got it, because we've gotten a lot of feedback that like it just feels more organic to the world, rather than, you know, the alternatives on film are either just like a flat 2D overlay on the screen or a cutaway to the character's screen, which already or always seems to interrupt the action. And so we wanted to embed it in the world around the characters and project into the future where, you know, more and more it's just going to be a part of our lives that doesn't interrupt the flow of our interactions with other people.
And
Yeah,
oh, go
I'll
ahead.
just add that like the design of it was so important, because from the first one, we didn't have any online graphics in the first movie. We had close-ups of screens and close-ups of computers. And one note that I remember in class that still sticks to me is like, they loved how Pope and we did a shot to where we would see the character. We didn't need to see what was on his computer. We just saw his face. But there were obviously so many important social media movies in the future, or social media moments in the future, that we needed to show the graphic. And so I knew that I didn't want it to look outdated, because literally a month after making the short, Facebook's interface changed and it looked different. And I was like, it's like every time I watch the short, I'm like, ew, it's like old Facebook. But, you know, so that was important from the beginning. And there's this really great documentary called Night Will Fall, where Alfred Hitchcock he was making a movie about the liberation of concentration camps. And I think it's a BBC documentary. And he was hired to do a movie for America, you know, that showed these concentration camps being liberated. And they wanted to show a map of where each of the camps were. And Hitchcock was like, no clutter, keep it simple, no words, like black and white, you know, with just dots. And that like starkness just made it so much scarier. And he approached it like a horror film, that they actually ended up, you know, axing him and having, I think it was Billy Wilder come on and direct it. But basically it's a really cool documentary. And that always stuck with me when it came to graphics on screen, and how graphics on screen can really push the themes and you know, the feel and tone of your movie so much further. And I don't think that it was actually helpful for Kristina in the edit, I will say. It was more so really helpful for us to send to the visual effects team, and sort of they could, you know, map it out, you know, because really Kristina, we learned at first we thought she could use these, but then we learned when editing that they really weren't helpful for her to cut with.
I will interject though to say the part that was really helpful was that the actors were actually using phones, and that they're actually doing the thing, and like, as opposed to the like, oh, I'm just clicking on stuff and it doesn't line up with anything. So this was like, okay, the actor is going through the process of sending a text. Now, I don't necessarily need to have exactly the text that they're sending. And, you know, we ended up changing a lot of that stuff, like they were saying. But it was really helpful that they were actually doing the thing, because then, I mean, it looks realistic because it is real. And I would imagine that on set it helped as well.
Jonathan, how does this wind up playing into the composition and other elements of the cinematography?
Yeah, so like we mentioned before, I mean, the script has gone through countless iterations, and in every iteration, social media was always a key element of it. So through every version of it, John and I had always discussed ways to avoid just looking at a screen, because the story and the emotion isn't in the screen, it's in the characters and in their faces and their eyes. So we were constantly talking about ways to always be on the character, always be on their reaction for something. I know there's one key moment in the scene in the bathroom where Ellery sees the exclamation point that her brother posts, and we have basically a POV from the screen. That was something that we had talked about potentially using more of, but we felt like that was a really good isolated moment to use it, and then from there we moved away from it and really just let ourselves live in the space with the characters. I think it also thematically works really well because these characters are inundated. I mean, we all are inundated by social media every day. We're almost dependent on it. So I think the idea of these social media bubbles and these text messages and everything just kind of living in the space and crowding the characters in frame really worked for us thematically. As far as framing goes, we had always known we wanted to frame a little wider just to give ourselves breathing room so that when we did punch in for a close, it really meant something. And that just helped us a lot for text message pop-ups. Like forgetting what we called them. We didn't exactly know where we would use them all the time. So sometimes it was just erring on the side of caution if I think we're going to have something here. So just, offset a little bit so we can have some room. But it didn't affect me tremendously because that was a conversation very early on. So it wasn't so much adapting to it. It's just that was always part of the visual language of the film from the beginning.
I just want to call out that John then went on to shoot The Social Dilemma. So he's pretty much cornered the market now on visualizing social media on screen. And we're not going to say who influenced who, but I hope it's a visual language that gets carried forward in a lot of films.
To both films' credits, neither film saw the other prior to release. So the design of graphics were always completely separate entities.
Well, it's a great doc. Everyone should go watch it if they haven't. That'll scare the pants off you too. For very different reasons.
There's a really nice moment towards the end where the university president's guts are just sort of hanging out as he's lying up against the tree. What were the discussions about sort of how far you wanted to push the gore? Because that, as someone who watches a lot of horror movies, I really like it when, you really do go that extra mile for that, the gross.
Yeah, you guys gotta have your money, you gotta get your money's worth. I think that approaching a horror movie the way that we did, what was most important was the characters and the characters' arcs and building the mystery of it. And we knew that, we were gonna have murders. We wanted to make them really good for the slasher audience and different. And it was important. It's obvious, it's so cool to see how everybody understands the sort of genre flipping of gender that we do. Because usually you're used to seeing a female, with her guts hanging out, not a male's. Except, Scream, we do see his guts hanging out the very beginning. It's the first gutted character. But I wanted each death scene to be very different. And the way that the death scene and the violence that was done was kind of inspired by the character of the killer and how he would murder these people and why. Because that's the hardest part about writing a horror movie, that you always have to you have to write multiple scripts when you write a horror movie. You have to write what the audience thinks, what's actually on screen, and then what your killer's doing. Because that's what's going to make all of those other moments believable and allow the mystery to unfold in a more organic way when you have the reveal. And that was a challenge for us from the beginning. But to give the audience, what they wanted, I wanted the final death to be the most brutal. And, sort of just having everything just spilled out, from inside of him is so much more of a message for why this killer would kill this guy and what he has to say. And it also just looked beautiful for the final kind of moment of the finale. And I also feel like a lot of people expect the very first death to be the most brutal, but we kind of wanted to increase the death sort of intrigue and also, brutality along with the suspense and buildup of the film.
What did you actually use for his guts?
Our makeup artist, not only great at makeup, she creates blood effects, and she actually had silicone guts that, we were on such a condensed schedule that we did everything we could, and we put as much blood on it we could to make it look realistic. So then even in post, we had to do a little bit of polishing on almost every single death scene, I will say. We did polish every single death scene in post. And so adding just a little bit more of a blood splatter or not splatter, really sort of pool that would happen over time if that were to happen to him, would have pooled out around him. So really thinking logically about that too.
I just want to say for anyone out there watching, if you want to ask a question, you can either type it up for the Q&A box, or if you want, you can just raise your hand and we can move people over to say hi if you want to turn your cameras on. So I know, I was probably going to go to South by Southwest last year, and I was really excited to see this there. Tell us what your experience has been since having to do things virtually. How have you rolled the film out? And I know it just came out officially, commercially, last Friday.
Yeah. It has been, it was really one of the most devastating things that could have happened to us. And it's one of those things that you don't expect to happen. Every filmmaker dreams of that moment to where their very first movie gets put on the national sort of spotlight stage of a festival like South by Southwest. But you have to take moments of crisis and turn them into opportunity. And we were very lucky. We had a great sales team, and our sales team believed in our movie. And that's one lesson learned. Before you go to a big festival like that, you want to try and have a good sales team before you go, because they're the ones who help negotiate the deals for you. So they had to scramble and really figure out how they could still get this movie in front of buyers. And that just took, so much, usually it takes like a weekend. It took like 2 months. And, they had to sort of adjust. And um, the film was acquired by the summer, which was great. And so it's really kind of like you wait and hear what they say, because, they're planning their layout of movies, and everybody was scrambling during the pandemic. Everything was changing. Nothing was for sure. And, we just had to not let that bother us and keep our focus on polishing this movie the best way we could up until we had to deliver it, because we had this time. Why wouldn't we use it to our advantage to make the movie better? Because we did rush the hell out of it, to get it to South by Southwest. So, but it was a bummer that we missed out on so many festivals that Brian can even speak to, just because there were a lot of opportunities that we could have had that we chose not to go with, because it was a virtual festival, and a lot of distributors, especially with the twist ending, are nervous about the virtual screenings and piracy. So we missed it on a lot, but we still got it to you guys.
Yeah, I mean, last year was a huge transitional period for the whole industry. And so there were a lot of unknowns, and you just, I mean, I guess you learn that early as a producer, right? You just have to be okay with a certain amount of unknown and just riding the wave and rolling with the punches. And when South by Southwest got canceled, really sad for the city of Austin too, because they really depend on that festival. And we were so excited because of the whole social media element, and it is such a tech heavy festival. There's like no better place for a film like this. But they were still very supportive of the film, and just the lead up to the festival was so instrumental in putting together the sales and distribution team that allowed us to still find a distributor and find a wide audience with this film. So yeah, I mean, we're thankful to XYZ Films and CAA, who helped with the sale. And it's been really interesting. I mean, the learnings never stop every step of the way on your first feature. And I had no idea that delivering a film is as involved of a process as it is. And I'm still delivering things on this film, and it's out now. It's wild. But, I could write a mini novella on that. But I think that ultimately it's about trusting, that the people who see something in the movie, they have the best intentions in mind, and they want to bring what they do, which is the whole marketing side, and understanding, what the world responds to, or what different markets respond to, even on like a territory by territory basis, and tailoring the presentation of the film to that. And so, when you set out to make the movie, I know like John had a very specific idea of how it could be presented, but he was also like open and collaborative with input throughout the distribution process. And I think we got to a really good place with it.
I'm curious if all of the extra work that you guys put into like the social media, accounts and preparation, stuff like that, played into any opportunities for more sort of a transmedia platforms for the movie. If you guys repurpose that at all for any way to sort of build anticipation or interactivity?
Oh man, I should have prepped to put this filter on screen. We captured a ton of 3D content on set. And so not only did our virtual production supervisor handle all the social media elements, but he also like did 3D scans of the rooms and captured the mask with photogrammetry. And then we ended up reconstructing the mask in 3D. And that's one of the things that we were going to present at South by Southwest, was like an Instagram filter that you could take selfies and spread the word on the mask. And so we did end up rolling that out last Friday, with the help of our co-producer, JP. He helped put that together on Instagram, and John has been the social media extraordinaire, cranking out high quality content to hype the film.
You learn how social media is really important, not just to get eyes on the movie, but to get word spread about the movie. Back in the fall, whenever social media, when the movie premiered at the Drive-In Festival for Screamfest, I hadn't really looked at the social media account in months, because we were Brian's wife did a really great job of acquiring such a great fan base during production for us. And you learn how you can use, especially if you have actors who have huge social followings, how you can utilize that to build hype. Even if it takes 2 years, they'll still stick around. And so it's been really fun to not just, engage with the fans that come to our movie because of the cast, but also there's so many outlets out there of horror fans that have these like hundreds of thousands of followers who just post horror memes. And for them to understand our movie and to then create their own work from it is really what's been the most beneficial thing, I think, in terms of social media for us, in terms of trying to like find more of an audience for your movie, because that's really how you can use social media to your benefit.
And I'll just say, I think we had that instinct early on going into production. Like, it's really important that we just capture as much as possible, because your first time out, you don't know what's going to be important down the line. But to anyone who's listening who is setting off on their first feature, like, not only is it important, it's critical. It is so critical for a distributor to have all the BTS, all the, photos, the stories from set, like everything that you can capture around the making of the movie is super critical to the distribution of a film. So by thinking about that stuff up front, and I know it's a lot to think about because you're so focused on just what gets captured on screen, but having the packaging around the film to hand over will give you a stronger relationship with your distributor, and it'll ultimately help your film be more successful because they need all that, when it comes time to release the movie.
I just want to ask really one last thing, and apologies, Lindsay, you can jump in, but it's a USC specific question. For the four of you, talk about the process of working together after you graduated, because this is one of the things that we try and instill into the students while they're there, which is work with learn to really develop relationships with your peers and your cohort, because you guys will be relying on each other every step of the way as you go through this career in film and television. So how did you approach, it sounds like John and Brian, you guys approached it by moving in together, but talk a little bit about your continued collaboration and how you sort of, if there were some intentionality to that, or if it just sort of happened because you guys stayed friends and really respected each other's work.
I think it's probably, I'll start, but I really want to hear what everybody else has to say. I think it's both. I love everybody here, and I love them, not just because we're best friends and we, party together, but because all of our relationships began because of our love for making movies and telling stories. And when you graduate USC, you go on and you live your lives, and you all try to find work in whatever you went to. You spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to USC to do. And it's very hard. It sucks. Not easy. But what keeps the excitement and passion and creativity going is when you stick together and are a team, because that's really what drove me to keep pushing to get this movie out there for so many years, even after all of the passes, all of the downs. It's literally like climbing up a mountain and getting pushed back down to the bottom every time. You just got to have the drive to get back up. And it's really, the people here who I knew were such great artists, and I knew they could do it. I knew together we could deliver the movie that you saw, and it was better than I could have ever imagined. And so it begins with making movies together. We all made movies together at the very beginning and continued to inspire each other. And I'll let Brian continue, but he and I met at orientation, before we even started class. And I remember, we just clicked. And whenever school started, we were just like, let's work on each other's projects. And it just became that until today. And when you graduate, you also need to start a company. If people want to pay you to do work, you need to do it legally. And so we started this company right away to try to get some work going, and that really kind of grew and allowed us to continue to learn and work on other projects that had very similar sort of social change themes to them, but also expand beyond our company and do other things.
I love working with USC grads on films because USC gives like a well-rounded film education. And so you're not just working with specialists or craftsmen, you're working with people who understand story at a deep level. And that's what this team brought to the table. So, you know, even though John and Kristina weren't in the room with us, you know, writing dialogue, like they gave feedback on the story for years. So they put their mark on this film and they contributed so much. And, you know, it really was like a team effort bringing it together. And it just is, it's such a nice feeling handing it over to a cinematographer who's not just thinking about a pretty composition, but like, how does this service the story? And an editor who's not just thinking about, you know, what side of the line should I be on, but like, what's going to help tell the story. So having that at the heart of it every step of the way through was just a really great experience. And yeah, I love these guys too. Like I'd work with them anytime.
I'll go, Kristina. You want me to go first? Yeah, like they both said, I don't think there was ever a moment or some outwardly conscious decision where I said, oh yeah, I'm going to do everything with John and everything with Brian, everything with Kristina and stuff. I think it just happened naturally. I learned very early on in school that I respected, I mean, beyond us being close friends and developing a bond, I think I learned early on that I just respected their instincts and I respected their tastes. And John and I have almost like a second language on set. It always feels like we're on the same page. In fact, when we were doing this film, we, again, because of the truncated budget and timeline and stuff, we had to do a lot of prep on the shot lists and on the storyboards. And we spent 2 or 3, like, it may have been close to 15 hours. It was some crazy amount of time where we just stayed up all night playing horror movies that we loved in the background, just, you know, talking about, we even watched, I won't name names, but we watched scenes of horror movies where we thought things didn't work. And we discussed things that we thought worked really well and things we didn't work and why they worked and why they didn't. And it was just those kinds of conversations and that developing that language for this film that I think, you know, I think that's really important to find in your collaborators. And like I said, I don't think there was ever a moment when that happened. I think it just developed naturally. They're working together continuously.
I would just add, I mean, I think, well, Brian, what you were saying about sort of just knowing that the USC grads are going to come out as sort of like well-rounded filmmakers, I think is a really big part of it, because especially from editing, and not every director, you know, thinks of the editing as a creative contribution. So it's really great to know, oh, when I'm working with people from USC, like they get it, you know, it's not a button pushing job. Like technically you're punching buttons, but it's fully about the story, and just like every other position is. And then I also think it's kind of just, oh, I had, you know, one good experience working with somebody, and I want to do it again. And then they told me that this other person is great. And so then I think the circle just keeps expanding. And I think having like a strong alumni network then is a big part of that. But especially working with John Berardo, I mean, other John too, but John Berardo especially, we've worked together on a lot of different things. And I think just that the trust that goes in both directions makes it always fun and always a really rewarding experience. And so I know for me, that's the kind of thing where it's like, oh, this is awesome. I mean, whatever it is, I know it's going to be a good experience. And then, you know, and that's always been the case when it's people from USC. So very grateful that to be brought on board for this, but also to be able to have our core kind of USC crew, which is great.
I also want to add that, like, you know, your relationship with your editor and your DP should be treated very much like your relationship with your actor. And like, it's all about trust and inspiring each other. And like, you know, much like Pope was saying, you know, we have a visual language, you know, that is so necessary to have with your DP and your director. It's the exact same with Kristina and I. Like, I just remember we were editing the short and she said something to me. She was like, I was thinking, bam, cut. Like, and I was like, she was like emotionally like like absorbing herself in this and thinking of ways to cut that I would have never thought of. And, you know, I remember that so clearly. And also we were in 508 together. So we learned how to work well with each other. And, you know, it's those moments and those relationships that you really want to keep on to, and also like understand why that is. And trust is a huge part of it. Like you want people who do things better than you do, you know, because it makes all of you better.
So I think we have kind of a shy audience tonight. So I'm just going to wrap up with one question. As you may or may not know, I have my master's from SC Cinema in what we called critical studies. Now it's cinema and media studies. And I wanted to ask, at a certain point towards the end of the film, Kylie, that's the name of the other female lead, has a film studies class that puts her to sleep and is totally disposable. So whose idea was that? And was it based off of a real class? And if so, who's the professor?
That's funny.
I don't remember.
I remember. It was based off of a real class. You'll feel good about it, Alex. It was not at USC. It was definitely a UCLA class.
I think
It wasn't USC.
UCLA discussed it because I mean, and nothing, you know, against UCLA, but UCLA would always have their film classes in the mornings, you know, like
I had them in the afternoon.
You know, or the ones I took did, and it was easy to fall asleep in those. But USC would never fall asleep. You got professors like, you know, Drew Casper. It's like really hard to fall asleep in those classes.
Yes, that in particular, his classes, you would have been called out very, very publicly for that.
A book thrown at you.
Well, thank you guys so much, and congratulations. And I'm sorry that we didn't see this, you know, I wasn't able to see this with you guys at the Ritz or another one of the Alamos in Austin, but it'll be great to have you back on campus at some point soon. I know we're still working out the plan, but it's coming. So hopefully the next time I see you guys, it'll be in person.
Hopefully,
that's
awesome.
the last thing. Like the whole reason this movie got made was because of USC. Like, and the alumni and the relationships that you build. Dean Daly said something on the very first orientation, was that it's not the professors that are going to get you jobs when you graduate, it's your peers. And that could not be truer.
Thanks again, and I hope you guys are able to enjoy some of the sort of bask in the release of the film, and come back soon.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.